Good morning, everyone. Good evening, Shravan sir. I am Hafsa Fatima from ESAL OUCT. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this talk today. We'd like to extend a special welcome to our guest, Mr. Ajay Kelkar, who will be speaking today. It's so wonderful to see you all on this beautiful Sunday morning today. We are so excited to have you all here today for our talk organized by ESAL. I hope that today's session inspires ideas and discussions for a progressive approach towards our goals. Let us start our session with a prayer song by Apurva Durishetty.
Morning everyone. Good evening, Shravan sir. శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి ఒక్కొక్క పేరు బహుతీపి బహుతీపి శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి ఒక్కొక్క పేరు బహుతీపి బహుతీపి శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి తండ్రి ఆనతి తలదాచుతనయుడు దశరథ రామయ్య స్థవనీయుడు తండ్రి ఆనతి తలదాచుతనయుడు దశరథ రామయ్య స్థవనీయుడు కడుమేటి విలువిరిచి కలికిని చేపట్టు కళ్యాణ రామయ్య కమనీయుడు కమనీయుడు శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి ఒక్కొక్క పేరు బహుతీపి బహుతీపి శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి పవమాన సుతుడు పాదాలు పట్టగా పట్టాభిరామయ్య పరంధాముడు పవమాన సుతుడు పాదాలు పట్టగా పట్టాభిరామయ్య పరంధాముడు అవనిలో సేవించు ఆశ్రితుల పాలించు అవనిలో సేవించు ఆశ్రితుల పాలించు అచ్యుత రామయ్య అఖిలాత్ముడు అఖిలాత్ముడు శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి ఒక్కొక్క పేరు బహుతీపి బహుతీపి శ్రీరామ నామాలు శతకోటి థ్యాంక్ యూ
Thank you, Apurva. Now, for our speaker. Mr. Ajay Kelkar is the co-founder of Hansa Securities. He is also the former CMO of HDFC Bank. A well-versed entrepreneurial business leader with 29 years of experience, he also works with people and coaches them to become more impactful and to take on new roles. Please welcome Mr. Ajay Kelkar.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
I would start by asking Sir a question. The popularity of your marathon races is no secret among the mass. How do you balance your training and work?
Wow, I didn't know that you know that I run, but that's nice to know. I think, no, it's never been a problem because you run in the mornings. So I used to run in the mornings and I still do. So it's in fact always been more energizing. It's always allowed me to energize my day that much more. In fact, I've always believed that running in a lot of ways shows you and gives you lessons for life. So work is part of life and it's always been very complimentary.
We would appreciate to have your guidance regarding your organizational skills.
That's a very wide question, but I would presume that the way you started by doing some research before a meeting, knowing more about me, if you treat life that way and you treat work that way, be prepared should be the motto, and that's the only lesson I think you need to carry.
We would like to know what is the criteria of your selection of appropriate aptitude in a person to learn and receive guidance from you.
I think hunger to grow. I would kind of isolate that to one thing, because when an individual has that hunger, then I think all obstacles can be resolved.
Would you like to share with us the toughest situation you have come across till date and how you managed to face it?
Oh, I think many difficult situations. I think I would not give you a business answer, but many years ago, when I was a student like you, and incidentally, when I was doing chemical engineering. So at one stage, amongst a few of us, we decided to sitting in the canteen while having tea, like all of you must be doing often. We were also doing, and a few people gave a challenge that what is the furthest distance you can go from Bombay on a bicycle, and someone said we can go to Kanyakumari. So that became a challenge, and I remember it was a Friday, and by Tuesday we had got sponsored, because none of us had the money. We came from middle class backgrounds. We didn't know what it'll cost. We didn't have cycles. So in 3-4 days we bought cycles. I was a very active environment person, active with the WWF. So they sponsored us, and in 3-4 days we left to go to Kanyakumari. In 18 days we reached Kanyakumari, and for three of us cycled, who were never cyclists before that. To imagine that we could go 100 kilometers a day itself was a barrier to break. Every night we would sleep wherever, temple, school, college, anyone who gave us shelter. And in 18 days we reached Kanyakumari. So I think that has been a life lesson for me, that anything is possible.
Would you please share with us the motivational force and constant support in the path of your entrepreneurial success?
I think family. Without family, I don't think I could have done what I did. My wife was a huge support. I think investors, you realize this only later, but the investors are a huge force, and they help you through bad times as well. So that the employees, I still remember our first employee when we started my company. We hired him. He was an engineer, and we were a technology analytics type of business. So we hired an engineer. And for 10-15 days, we didn't really know what to do with him. He was the only employee. So after 10 days, he comes to me and says, he was from Bihar. So he says, can I go to my village? Because till you guys decide what to do, can I go to my village and come back? So I remember that very clearly. I think those first employees were great support. And throughout, I think that's been important.
We Indians are proud of a gem in the field of entrepreneurship, the father of Indian industry, Mr. Jamsetji Tata. We would like you to share your opinion about an incredible entrepreneur of India.
I guess I would look at Narayana Murthy from a point of view of being a first generation entrepreneur, how he broke out and created Infosys, stuck to his values, created such a lasting organization with that type of approach, which at that time in India seemed difficult, because you always believed at that time in India that to be an entrepreneur, you got to be corrupt, you got to have different value systems. So I think I would definitely call him out as one of the great inspirations. But I think there are many, and you just have to look around you, the small vendors around you who may not have built an Infosys, but they have lasted the lockdown, they've survived, they continue to grow. I think those people inspire me as well.
You have recently put your hands in the field of data science. So what advancements have you made in that sector?
Well, that was about 13 years ago, so not so recent. But and also I've moved on from my company, Anthas Equity, to do other things as well. But I think the biggest challenge in that space is really not, according to me, the aspect about algorithms and the technology. It is really the aspect of being able to bring a business understanding to the technology and data science. I think that is really where the challenge lies. And I would encourage all of you who are interested in data analytics to think of it as if it were a liberal arts subject rather than a statistical subject. and I think you'll make more business impact by formulating problems better.
What is Hansa Equity Company and why did you start it?
So when I started along with my partner Swami, when I started Hansa Equity in late 2007, the idea was to partner companies who had data to help them to create data in a way by which it was configured to get value from it and to both increase revenue, increase customer value. So the company's equity, the name Sequity was customer equity, and enhancing customer equity was the vision of the company. Sometimes people confuse this to be a stock market play, but it was not. Sequity was the customer equity was the name, and enhancing customer equity was our vision. So how do we go to companies and say that, how would you like to enhance customer equity? How do you acquire more intelligently? How do you manage customers more optimally? And how do you retain them? So those are the three questions we used to answer. And for that, you need data, you need algorithms, you need technology. Those were enablers. But essentially, the company was built around the vision of enhancing customer equity.
According to you, what is the most important thing that one has to or one should learn?
I think to learn, that is the most fundamental thing. And for people my age today, for example, very often learning again is a challenge. And I think all of you, millennials, Generation Z, all of you for whom it comes more naturally, I think you must keep that going. I think it came naturally to us also at one time. And now we are probably learning to learn. I think that's the first skill and the last skill which you need today, learning to learn.
So I've recently come across your quotation, companies grow when people grow. Yeah. So can you brief about it?
Yeah, I really like your questions, by the way. I mean, you guys have done a good job of, getting some inputs. So, compliments for that. And I think to answer your question is really this. I think you guys are already growing by the way you're having this engagement and the kind of questions you're asking. So, any enterprise in life requires personal growth, whether it is life or it's a business enterprise. It's growing a family, whatever it might be. It needs personal growth. And companies from a professional point, companies grow till people grow into bigger jobs. It's a different way of seeing things. So they say that, how can you be a beginner, which is, constantly the challenge for people. Well, how can you keep seeing the world with new eyes? So I think to be able to grow is to be able to see the world with new eyes and therefore establish and bring so much more value to the company that you work for. So that's the way I see it.
Thank you, sir.
And companies grow only when people grow.
Yes. Thank you, sir. It's time to open the floor for all the participants to ask questions and receive guidance from Mr. Ajay Kelkar. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have a question, Srividya here.
Yeah, Srividya.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, Ajay ji. It was so nice to hear your journey, and obviously these guys have amazing questions. I was a little more caught up with your cycling to Kanyakumari. How do you connect that endurance to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, good question. I think in many ways, I think it starts with, just the audacity of what you take on. So I think as every entrepreneur, when you start your journey as an entrepreneur, what you take on is extremely audacious for you. So how do you not get pushed back by the audacity that is needed? For us, when we started cycling as young 19, 20-year-olds who hadn't really moved out of their houses too much, Kanyakumari was very far away. And to imagine that we would be on highways with trucks was even more difficult to imagine. So one is, I think, the ability to be able to make friends with audacity. I think that's the first learning that I would think that gave us. The second really is that, setbacks are a part of such endeavors, and you have setbacks. We changed some, I think, 25 tires and 20 cycle tubes, and all sorts of, things happened to us. So you begin to look at setbacks differently, and your ability to do that again as an entrepreneur is very important, because as an entrepreneur, you're constantly short of something. In fact, Professor C.K. Prahlad had a lovely definition for entrepreneurship. And his comment really was two words, two alphabets. He said that most people understand A is equal to R, or A is less than R. So A is for ambition and R is for resources. So most managers understand that ambition should be equal to resources, or ambition should be less than resources. While entrepreneurs believe ambition should be greater than resources. So I think, again, that cycling trip and other adventure taught us that resources will never be enough. Setbacks will always be there. Take on audacity. With audacity, make it your friend. And I think finally, you don't survive without team members. The good days, the bad days, but the people who are with you are the ones who allow you to really go forward. So in that sense, the ability to be able to value your team, to have gratitude for what they bring to the table, to realize that there's no one single hero, but we all create together. And I think finally, the fact that success is all about chance. Whether you like it or not, whatever expertise and whatever pride we have in what we bring to the table, I think luck, whatever, if you're religious, then God, chance, whatever, plays a huge role. So I think these would be my lessons.
Great. Thank you so much. So what was a mindset which kept you going throughout? I'm sure there are a couple of mindsets which are, I'm sure you know what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, are you asking about the cycling trip specifically?
Or even otherwise.
Right, right. So I think
that and otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. So I think one mindset, I don't know, I'm sure many people have the same type of feeling, that the ability to keep killing myself, probably the mindset. So after doing this Bombay to Kanyakumari trip, in a couple of years, a few of us, again, we cycled across the Himalayas. And then we went and, of course, at one stage when I was doing professionally very well, a lot of my friends said, you're doing, and those years people wouldn't go out and start out on their own so easily, 13 years ago. And my friends and colleagues said, you're doing professional harakiri, because I was leaving a very wealth producing job like HDFC Bank, and we all know how that stock has gone. So for senior leaders there, the stock options were very tempting. And I was leaving a job like that. So again, it was like it felt very familiar. Why are you killing yourself again? And then I think 3 years ago, when the company was doing well, we were almost 1,000 people, but I had an urge to do different things. So I went to my board and I said that I want to move away from operations. And my first principals were calling out to do different things. So I think being able to listen to your first principles and being aware of and happy to engage with killing yourself is the way I've seen it.
For me, this story appears for me that you're not attached to anything. You're willing to let go. You want to do so many things, but you are not held up on, okay, this is my baby, I need to do. Or I think that is my learning, what I picked up from your story, that don't be attached and learn to let go. Wow, that's a great, a great message. Yeah. Thank you, Ajay-ji.
Yeah. Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that you completed chemical engineering. Did you do anything in chemical engineering?
I hated it. I hated every bit of what I did. I shouldn't have gone there. After the first year, I took admission for a math stats economics course in St. Xavier's, got admission, but didn't have the balls to rebel against society and leave something as good as engineering. But I hated it. In fact, my largest failures in my life were in my engineering education. So, obviously after that, I joined actually Reliance for 6 months. So there was a interesting role that I took, but I didn't stay on. So the answer to that question is that I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I was not cut out to be an engineer, and wisdom prevailed.
But though you don't like it, you were able to join RIL. That's a great thing.
Yeah, well, I think all of us who get, engineering degrees still, you do get good jobs, and I'm sure all of you will. So I think it is more the ability to recognize what you cannot do or not good at, or what is not calling you.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, we would like you to elaborate on your journey so far, your achievements, your idea of growth mindset, how you help and motivate people.
Okay, so I'm just thinking aloud that when you do some of these things, it's often one way, right? And Shravanji, I was wondering maybe if I can share a few slides and then maybe engage with all of them a little bit more. Will that be all right for all of you?
Sure, sir.
Yeah.
So when Ajayji said ability to kill oneself, what did you what came in your mind? What does it mean? What did it mean to you? Any of the students can
Like
talk.
sacrifices.
Like sacrifices. Okay. Any others?
Coming out of comfort zone.
Coming out of comfort zone.
To kill the indiscipline.
To kill the indiscipline. Nice.
Figuring out what you're not good at.
Figuring out you're not good at. Okay.
To reinvent oneself.
To reinvent oneself. Okay. What do you mean by to reinvent oneself?
Again, it means the same what Vinayanda said, I think.
What is that? Go ahead, say it. It's okay. We are just talking, and that is how you express, you come up with ideas, and all that. So, what does reinventing mean?
If we are bored of something, then we need to get rid of it and try moving towards something which we enjoy.
Okay. Good. Any other thoughts?
Overcoming the distractions that we have in the way of reaching our goal.
Okay. Nice.
Are you able to see my screen? Or?
Yes, we are able
Yes,
to.
sir.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think even technology sometimes helps. Okay. Anyway, finish what you're doing. Then I'll continue. Shravanji, please continue.
No. We are done. We are just just talking. This one question we can talk for hours. So
yeah, very true. Yeah, but I would love to hear. I mean, everyone seemed to be very alive in the moment. I don't want to disturb that flow. If you could just please continue that, and I'll come in whenever that finishes.
No, I think it's good. I just wanted maybe you could do one thing is you could end the topic with your thoughts on that particular 4 words.
Yeah,
in myself.
Yes. Okay. Sure. So I think I think for me the most difficult part of accomplishing something is to be able to take on something which might be dangerous, which might end up creating failure, and yet to be able to realize that as long as you grow internally and have the internal strength to take care of those failures, you will be able to overcome. So in that sense, it's a repositioning of the word failure that is the lesson for me from being able to. So while it started by saying, oh, it's difficult, I have to do it, let me do it at all costs, it started maybe that way, but I think it transformed into saying that failure is an external word. You never fail, you only grow. And I think that's the way I like to take it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, great. So should I just carry on a little bit?
Sure, sir.
Okay. So, can you see my slide that the world needs learning agility?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to, talk about just a few thoughts in the next few slides that, this whole thing about technology is changing so rapidly that all of us are needing to adapt, and we are not adapting at the rate at which technology is changing. And so therefore that is going to be a significant issue as we go along. And someone asked me earlier about what is that one skill that I believe we need to have, and that's therefore learning agility. That to me is most critical. And this is a time when I just wanted to ask all of you, and Shravanji, if you could trigger the poll, it would be nice. Do I need to stop sharing for you to do that?
You should be able to see the poll. If you don't know how to access the poll, please go into the triangle button, and then you should see the poll. Do you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, start.
You'll have to read the question and the answer to understand it. I'm sorry, in a hurry, I've written it a little inelegantly.
Do you want to explain the question by any chance?
Yeah, I can do that. So essentially, what I'm really wanting to know is that will you like to do things in one sequence, which is complete my education, complete my formal learning, and then start working, or would you be open to not doing it in sequence? That's really the question. So do you want to complete your education and start working as two distinct phases, or are you open to finishing undergrad degree, then working, maybe coming back to full-time education at various stages, and you don't see it as two distinct phases? That's my question. Is the question clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So only 9 people responded. 7 said option 2. 2 said option 1.
Interesting. So and would maybe a few voices can come in to say that are more people also feeling that way, that option 2 is what they feel? Is option B looking more, or is option A looking more?
So I'm looking at here 8. So looks like slightly option B is slightly higher, but option A, yeah, maybe option B is maybe 1 or 2 people higher. That's it.
Sir, there are actually 6 option A's and 5 option B's, sir. And Vinayana posted, option A, B, both.
No, he
changed it to
option
B.
No, he posted
And then
it
option B.
again.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 6.
So it's equal, huh?
Yes, sir.
So that's interesting. I mean, I didn't expect that to be. I thought that you would get more people would be looking at option A rather than option B. But it looks like a lot of you are open to it, and I just wanted to talk about this very quickly, and maybe then we can come back to questions. That really today there's a very interesting book called The 100-Year Life, and those of you who can get access, please do have a look at it. And there is a massive increase in therefore the number of careers that people will have, and many of you might end up having 5, 7, maybe more careers in the space of your life. And the world is no longer sequential. In my time, and maybe Shravanji and Ian's time, it was a 3-stage model where education, work, and retirement kind of followed in sequence. But today they call it the portfolio or multi-stage life, where education, exploration, employment, and then transition maybe, then you do a portfolio of mixed paid and unpaid work, and all of this goes on. So which is a change in rules therefore. So the old rules really were very sequential, very linear. There was a lot of planning done by the company or by the manager to take you on to new areas. While in the new rules, really a lot of people are about talking about new experiences, finding new opportunities, looking for mentors, moving to new positions. So that's really a large change that's happening. So I will, we'll do the breakout room a little later, Shravanji. I'll just move on. Yeah. So one, I just wanted to, I think we wanted to talk about digital also. So I just wanted to touch upon the fact that this world is just going completely digital. And if you look at it from, these are 2019 numbers, but from almost 7.5 billion population, you're talking about 67% penetration into mobile, almost 1 in 2 people use the internet, and 45% people are active social media users. So this is a very large shift in terms of what's going on in the world, and for especially those of you who are going to be, imagining your futures, I think this is an important thing to look at. And when you look at this, I'm I'm going to also talk about the fact that when you look at this, everything which is digital produces data. And I just wanted to see the next video. And Shravanji, if you can tell me whether the sound is, whether it's audible, because sometimes I need to enable it, I feel. So I wanted to have a look at this film. It's an advertisement, but remember the context I was talking about, that digital is producing a lot of data. Keep that in mind when you watch this film.
Peter, come take a look at this. Mr. Daniels.
Look at this.
What's this? The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
The clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
I need more trees. More trees? I'll get you more trees.
Hey, take a look at wood pulp.
Whoa. Everything you got to whip up right now.
He really loves that thing.
That's it. So would love to hear people. This ad was, remember we were talking about data.
Play.
Peter, come take a look at this. Mr. Daniels.
Look at this.
What's this? The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
The clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
I need more trees. More trees? I'll get you more trees.
Hey, take a look at wood pulp.
Whoa. Everything you got to whip up right now.
He really loves that thing.
So I hope everyone could see it this time.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So, remember the perspective I was talking about was digital produces data, and you can see what this data was all about. It was just a kid hammering away at a keyboard, right? And therefore, the point I wanted to make and really share with you people that the more the data, the more, the way we look at it gets formed from our judgment. And how quickly this full manufacturing cycle judgments got formed, right? Just because clicks were going up, right, from cutting trees to manufacturing more encyclopedias, they just went berserk, right? And do you people feel there are biases that we have when we look at data?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So just to have a conversation about that, I just wanted to share a few slides, and that is the last part of what I'm going to share, and then we can move into a conversation. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Yeah, and let me know when you can see it. I think you should be able to see it soon. Yeah, so like I was saying, this whole digital is also what it's doing. It's bringing massive amount of data to all of us. And you saw that the moment data comes, biases also come. So I just wanted to share the last thing that I want to share on the presentation is just a story, right? What tends to happen is that when there is data and we also have our biases, sometimes we say that, okay, there's a specialist either in the company or if you're looking at it personally, someone who's a specialist should look at that data. But we end up using our biases when the data comes to us. So there is a World War II story I wanted to share with you. And the riddle was this, that England was at war with Germany, and they would get bombed constantly by Germany, and they would send their own B-17 bombers to Germany to bomb. And the riddle that they had was that how do you send your bombers who get shot down by enemy fighters? So you keep armoring them, you keep adding armor to the aircraft. But the more you add iron to your planes, the more it makes it heavy, they can't maneuver, and then they get shot down more. So over armoring is a problem. Also, they become heavier. also at the same time, under-armoring is a problem because then they get shot down also. So they had a big statistical group which looked at data, and even in World War II in England, and it was manned by very good scientists. And they were given this riddle that what is the fine line? What is the line that we can draw in terms of being able to really solve for this problem? And so the scientists got all the data, everyone looked at all the planes which came back and looked at the bullet hole locations. They created a lot of data around which part of the aircraft, where were the bullet holes, and the pattern seemed to come through. And the pattern seemed to show that planes were not being hit in the cockpit or the tail. The lot of bullet holes in the fuselage, but nothing in the engines. And everybody's judgment seemed to say, therefore, it's very clear that you need to look at that pattern, and therefore, armor the planes where they are hit the most. Right? That's logical because you've looked at the data. But what one of the scientists did was he said that, look, I think you are forgetting something. You're forgetting a very important thing. And you are only looking at the data, where with the planes which got back. What about the planes which didn't come back because they got shot? You don't even have that data, right? And because you don't have the data, you don't realize that really the areas which you should reinforce, the ones which were terminal, were the ones where you have no data. And this was the bias which held people back. This was the bias that all of us bring to to our own way of looking at the data. That maybe look for where the data is not there. That itself is something which sometimes we don't do. And this story, I thought, was very indicative of how, while digital is becoming so important, people are beginning to bring more bias on more data. And that is the recipe for failure. So that is the only thing I want to share. Any comments anyone has, I would love to hear.
This is one thing, Ajayji, we do talk about it.
Yes.
It should always be the goal which should guide you.
Right.
Not your biases which guide you. Not your habits which guide you.
Yeah.
It should be your vision, it should be your goal, what you want to create, that should guide you. When you see your vision and say, hey, I want to go to US, you should not, then you should say, what are the qualities I have? How do I get there? And then use your habits and, to get there.
Right.
But what we do is we say to ourselves, oh, how can I get there? I'm not good enough. I can't go there. I'm not, this and that. So that the biases will decrease if we look at our goals.
I think it's a very good point, Shravanji, that looking at your objectives, your outcomes, and then also I think anchoring that in your values, the combination of looking at objectives, anchoring to your values gives a lot of guidance. That's a great point. Absolutely. I'm now open to whatever questions you guys would have, and let's just follow that flow. Shravanji, is it okay if we do about 10-15 minutes? Is that all right?
Yeah.
So we would now like to open the floor for participants again for questions and comments.
So if you have a question, click on raise hand, and then Hafsa will call your name.
Vivekta, please ask your question.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Shravan, sir.
Morning.
So my question is, you have mentioned that we have the opportunity to pursue 5 to 7 careers, right? So how do you think we can manage it? I mean, I have many things I want to pursue, but then I don't know how to manage them or when to pursue them. When is the right time to pursue them?
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I think, the way I think I would always urge you to look at it is that, there are going to be like that whole concept of ikigai, right? All of you would have heard of the word ikigai, the Japanese concept around what you love, what the world needs, and what you will get paid for. So I think if you look at that intersection set, sometimes we say that what we love, the world may not need, and I may not get paid for. But the way to look at it is that in today's world, if you see Jeff Bezos retired or is moving into a chairman role from being a CEO. He announced that a few days ago. But if he had thought of the fact that his passion was to have a store which sells every product in the world, and if that was just something which he had left, it would never have happened. So I think sometimes passion and having that passion, developing it is the way to be able to find a reason why someone will pay you, and will also be the reason why someone will need it, because if they don't see it, they don't know they need it. We never knew about Amazon. If Bezos didn't have the passion, we wouldn't have known that today we need it. So I think one is to be able to isolate or identify 2-3 things which you're really, really passionate about. And then even if they don't necessarily earn you immediately, or they don't show you the path in terms of what you want to do for them immediately, but to keep your commitment for them, and sometimes these are about not necessarily, things which are known to everybody. It could be something which you know and you love, which others may not. But to honor your own beliefs enough to be able to give it the time and commitment required to really make a difference, I think that's the first thing that you should do. The second thing I think which is very important is sometimes we don't realize how much we over-invest in things. So which is that there may be things that you're doing where you're over-investing. Maybe you're very good at something, and you will keep doing that because you're very good at it. So I've always found it profitable to ask whether am I over-investing in something just because I'm good at it. And when you ask that question, you will release at least a couple of hours every week just by experimenting that, oh, okay, I'm good at this. Let me not go into overkill and stop 1 hour short and see what happens. So finally, it's about time. So make yourself the time from those couple of hours to feed back into your passion. That's how I would look at it. Hope that answers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Kushala, please go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, sir. My question is that how do you build a successful customer base?
I think the fundamental thing you need to do is to ask whether the product you are making is creating wow for the customer or not. If that is what you're focused on, the customer base will build because you will get repeat customers. So be focused on what is the value that your product is giving to your customer and how can you sharply improve that value. That's the most important thing in my view.
Thank you, sir.
Sanjana, you can ask your question.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Actually, my doubt was when we have businesses that are into services, like they provide services, then what is the most effective way to optimize the website? Because apart from keywords, because that's the one thing that will always be the first, but then what other from keywords can we focus on that will boost the website?
See, I think when you think about this whole thing about boosting the website, I think you need to think about creating not just keywords but pillars. These are defined from the point of view of how your consumers buy. So let's say you have a real estate site and you're selling, let's say, construction or let's say flats to people. Then how do people buy? What are the pillars which you can create around the type of information that the buyer is seeking? So identifying those pillars is the first step. And if those pillars are connected to the buying behavior, so when I buy flats, for example, buy a flat, if I look at the neighborhood, that's one very important pillar, which is the neighborhoods. Then another pillar could be this whole area of, this whole aspect of amenities. And the third pillar could really be the ability to understand who else, what type of people are there in that neighborhood. So these three become pillars. And then your keywords are built around those pillars rather than just being built around how do you drive traffic. You are promoting those pillars and then everything is built around those pillars. That's the way you should do it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Apurva, please go ahead with your question.
Good morning, sir. I would like to know what kind of culture exists in your organization? How do you manage your team and all?
Yeah, so I think the culture around a services organization is always about being able to feel empowered to be able to take action, because you're servicing a client. What is important is the client should get value. And so one culture, just to give you one example, is that when me and my founder started the company, one example to us of behavior from a junior person, which we really encouraged, was, let's say we are all sitting in a meeting room, all senior people in one meeting room. But a very junior person knocks on the door saying that, and points at one of the people saying, I think I need your 2 minutes because the client needs this. That to me is a sign that two things. One, that person felt empowered enough to disturb a meeting where top people were sitting, and felt confident that if he or she is doing it for a client need, it's a good thing to do. That's an example of a culture which we always try to develop, that client is always first. If it means that you have to disturb the CEO or the founder or anyone else, it's fine. Be clear why you're disturbing, and if it's in the client's need, do more of it. So we always, and we at that point itself, we would say to this person, so that we allowed the culture to develop, saying that sometimes it would be, let's say I'm very passionately speaking about something, it's a busy meeting, 5-6 people are there, and this junior person knocks and comes in and says, I really want your time, and that is an example of culture. That's when culture walks the talk. See, because otherwise you could say that, you want a culture which is empowered, but when this person walks, comes in the meeting, you say, look, can't you see I'm very busy? Can't you see the senior person is very busy? Why are you disturbing the meeting? Then what culture do you create? The culture you create is that even if a client calls, if there are other important things happening, don't bother. Don't wait. The client will wait. So that is one example of, I think I would just take that one example of a culture from a professional services, client-facing business point of view.
Glad to hear that, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Deepak, you can ask your question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So I recently come across a conversation with my friends, and there's this question that's bugging me a lot. So if you see today in the business world, Jeff Bezos is the top one, and Elon Musk is the top in science. And one of my friends said that both of them are top in those fields, so they are totally equal in sense of intelligence and all, but in different fields. So I've been thinking, how can you, relate between business and science, and how can both of them will be equal? And as I keep thinking about it, it's looking like a paradox to me. So may I know your opinion on?
So what is the paradox? That business and science can come together? Is that what you mean?
Those two are totally different, right? And they're saying that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are totally equal in the power of intelligence and all.
Right. Yeah, so I know, Deepak, I will respond on two levels. I think when we go through education, unfortunately, a lot of attention is paid towards IQ. And, the intelligence is described as IQ. While my own experience of life overall is that intelligence is far broader than IQ, and EQ, agility quotient, emotional quotient, lots of other quotients need to be looked at. So I would encourage you to not think of only IQ as the guiding principle behind success in life. There are many other cues, quotients, which I think you should look for. That is one. Second is, I think science is the underlying basis of all business, actually. Recently I came across a patent which Amazon filed, a very interesting patent. And this patent was for, using in their devices. So like Alexa is able to, through that patent and the work they've done, they're able to, look at voice and identify whether the voice belongs to someone who may potentially have some disease because of the timbre and the nature of the voice. And using AI, they've been able to make that identification happen. Now imagine, of course, it can be misused. There are many ways where it can be misused as also. But imagine an old age homes for elder care. Imagine the power of technology like that, that if you are providing for, let's say, very senior, citizens whose parents, let's say, are in India, but they are in the US, but they have Alexa device in the house, and through the voice itself, Alexa is able to give guidance to the children who are in a different country, that maybe your parents may have the following, potentially maybe a cold coming up or whatever. So that's just one example. There are, science has been the basis for all business really in many ways. So there I don't see any disconnect. Do you see a disconnect there, Deepak?
I mean, it's not about connection between science and business, sir. Do you think that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are equal? I mean, they are equal in. I'm asking. I'm not thinking only about intelligence quotient. This question. I'm asking that are both of them equal in. In sense of intelligence.
Yeah. So see, intelligence also. How do you? Is a Nobel Science winner the most intelligent person, or is that? So I think it depends on how you look at intelligence. I would only interpret. Do not look at intelligence as a race to the top. Don't see it as who is on top, who is below. Rather, you see it as a tool set that you have, and if you use it with other possible tool sets which are more social in nature, the combination can do a lot of good for society. So I would much rather say that maybe a Bill Gates may have less IQ than Elon Musk, but Bill Gates has given 50% of his net worth to charity, and I think he's done some great work around giving his money out to build beneficial causes. I see that there's much more value than having IQ. So I think it's a question of perspective there, and I wouldn't really worry too much about who has more and who has less. I don't know what you think, but when I think back to whatever 35, 40 years earlier, and I think of the people who came first in my class in chemical engineering, and I think of some of us who belong to the bottom, I'm not sure that the societal impact can be rated the same way. It's not that the first guy did not do good things. I think he did, but I think we also did good things. So I think in that sense, I would only not rate IQ as highly as Deepak somewhere I'm sensing you are rating. I hope it gives you a perspective, Deepak.
Yes, sir. Well, actually, I've started to think about things in a totally broad way, and this is something I've been stuck at. So I thought of taking some opinions from you. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks.
It helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Nishita, please go ahead with your question.
Hello, sir. Good morning. Myself, Nishita. I'm so glad to meet you, sir. So I had a question, sir. What was your key driving force to become an entrepreneur, sir?
Yeah, so I think unfortunately the key driving force turned out to be the wrong one, and the key driving force at one stage for me, though eventually it was not, was that I should not have a boss. And then after I started my own venture, I realized that my employees are my bosses, my clients are my bosses, my investor is my boss. Everybody became my boss. So, but I think if you look at the key reason, a lot of research has shown that there are three parameters which you must look for in life. One is autonomy, second is independence, and the third is mastery. So I think, to my mind, the need for autonomy, the need for independence, and the need for mastery in the space that I have chosen, I think these were the three key drivers, and I thought the best place which could give me the ability to build on them was if I allowed my independence to lead it, which was not in the corporate sector. That's how I chose.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Swapna, you can ask your question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
What is your greatest achievement so far, sir?
I think that's always a difficult question, but I've not achieved so much. I won't really call myself a great achiever. I think the greatest achievement would be to understand understand my limitations better, and to be able to work with them and work differently. So whether limitations are about people, about initiatives, people, whatever it might be, I think that would be the most important one for me.
Ajayji,
yes.
Do you, before we have three more questions there,
yes.
Before people ask questions, I was wondering whether you want to ask any questions.
I would love to. I think the poll was the first question I asked, but I think I would love to ask, what does this group feel about the Indian problems that we see around us? So many kids are remaining, all of you are amongst the privileged few who are in education, but I'm the trustee in an NGO called Antarang, and we work with disadvantaged kids. So I want to hear, what do you people feel about the fact that so many other kids of your age in India do not have access to even basics of education, and what do you people want to do about it? Anyone, I would love to hear.
I think we are really blessed to be receiving education from a prestigious institution, and it's really unfortunate that many kids our age are not able, do not have access to this type of education. I think creating awareness through social platforms, that is the main thing that we at our level can do. I think we can do more things, but we need to get involved in that. So,
yeah. So awareness is one part.
Yes.
Anyone else? Yeah, go on, Hafsa.
Yeah. Educating people about letting their kids go to like school, college to get education. That is also one part.
Yeah. Yes, go on, please.
As Hafsa said, we need to educate parents for letting their children to.
Too good.
Because when this COVID situation has come, many students in government schools have left the schools and went for working in farms and all, and now they are not coming back again.
Right.
Now we are my father works in a government school, so he's telling me the situation, how it is going on. Like most students are not coming to the schools, they are calling their parents, convincing them to send and all that. So we need to do that.
So educating parents is important. Yeah. Very important point. Yeah. Who else? Yeah.
Sir, I feel implementing proper midday meal schemes will attract a lot of people, because especially in COVID times, everybody is struggling.
Yeah.
So if you have a proper midday meal scheme where the students are actually getting some good food, then many will be up for it.
Absolutely. So giving them that fact that if you come to school, you will get a meal, that itself is a huge driver. Yeah, very important. What else?
Some of them parents are telling that while going to work and all, we can eat from there. Why should we send to schools and all also?
Yeah. I mean, that's a perspective. Sure. Yeah. Who else? I would love to hear more.
Me.
Yes, Apurva.
Yeah, Deepak, go on.
Apurva, you can.
I feel making everything online from now, like people are having mobile phones and other gadgets. So making everything online will let them bring out that interest, and making interesting content and developing different ways of studying.
Great.
May help.
Yeah. Absolutely. Deepak, you had something to say?
Yes, sir. I agree with Apurva, sir. Making everything online will bring more students into the education system.
Right.
Like sir, Deepti said about going to farms and all. So I would like to add something creating podcasts and audio things also may help.
Right.
Those type of students, there are some situations where family cannot be run solely by parents.
Absolutely.
Children also sometimes has to work. So this can help,
Absolutely.
multitasking also can help.
So I had a follow-on question. So I've heard at least 10-15 different ideas, and the question now is, has any one of you done any of these things in the last 30 days?
No, sir.
Anyone who has done anything of this nature in the last 30 days, I would love to hear them. Maybe called up a parent of a disadvantaged kid who's not sending him to school or her to school, or called up someone, or maybe your own maid servant in the house or a driver, any action. I'm looking to see any action which any one of you took. Maybe gave money to support someone because we know people are in difficulty. Could be any action.
Ajayji,
yes,
I have constantly done it since I came to US.
Great.
I did not do it when I was in India.
Right. But Shravanji, you are anyway doing a lot. I'm keen to hear from the students in the last 30 days. And the reason I know there's a gap, it's not that you guys don't do stuff. And I know all of you do stuff. But I'm just bringing to your attention that in India, we all harbor under this notion that someone else is doing the work. That, in Hindi they say, right, koi aur karega. So government may do, municipality may do, maybe MLA will do. And then we also look down upon politicians that they don't do. So
I think Meena ma'am wants to say something.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I have just last couple of days back, I dragged my maid's son to another school. In fact, I had to talk to the school a lot to allow him to join the classes that they have opened now after the COVID. They started only 9th standard and he's actually studying 6th. So I requested them and told them just let him be there because he's getting really spoiled sitting at home.
Right. Oh, absolutely. This is.
We are trying to do. I mean, earlier I didn't do, like you said.
When
I was too busy with my work, I didn't do. Now I have the time and intention, so I'm planning to do that.
Super. That's a great encouragement. Yeah. And I would just urge everyone to think on these lines. That what can I do? Not.
Like I've said.
Go on, please, Apurva.
Like I've said, my friends started teaching. My friends started teaching and posting their videos in YouTube so that that may help in some way.
Absolutely. And now we will see you teach, Apurva, right? That's the next step that you will take. Next time we ask this question, you will not say that my friend taught. You will say you taught.
I taught, yeah. Sure.
Ajay, I just want to tell you also that there are some organizations, I know my daughter also worked for that some 8 years ago. There is something called Make a Difference. So their job is to go, so they go to the orphanages or destitute homes. After work hours, she was working with ISRO. So she used to go after work hours and teach the children there.
So wonderful.
Every Sunday, Saturday, that way.
Right. Absolutely.
Ajayji, we are also planning to very soon, probably within the next couple of months, we are starting a tutoring program where these students will be tutoring the students here in US who are having difficulty studying and also who are difficulty having, paying attention. So we are thinking people from other side of the world, when they are calling and they are talking to them, these kids might say, oh, wow, someone else from the other side is interested in talking to me. So we're starting that program very soon.
Oh, fantastic. Good to hear. And I'm really glad to have met all of you. Shravanji, thank you for having enabled this meeting. And AN, of course, thank you for introducing me to all of you. It's been a great learning for me as well from you guys.
I would just like to say if there are any final comments from anyone.
Sir?
Go ahead, Deep.
Sir, about your previous question, like many kids in India are not able to access education because of their financial status. So I believe, whatever you study, you may study like till 10th, or you might have completed only your intermediate, or you have just graduated or done your master's. So when it comes to doing a job and earning money, it all depends on the skill, right? So my idea on this is depending on the places where those children are brought up and about the conditions in which they have been brought up. So why can't we just train them why don't we train them so that they can acquire some worthy skills which have a promise of getting a job with a good pay. so that their kids can actually go to school without any obstructions.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So that is one of the things I really want to do.
Sure. Thanks, Deepak. That's good.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And before Hafsa ends, I do want to say thank you, Ajay ji, for giving us your time, and we are definitely very glad to have you here.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajay ji. I think it was quite insightful for us as well, along
Thank
with
you
the
so
students.
much. Yeah.
It was a pleasure listening to you, and some of the ideas that keep running around in my head, coming so crystallized, very nicely organized, that I enjoyed that part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I proceed with the vote of thanks? Okay. It has been our tribute to host all the members and audience of the meeting. I am thankful to all the participants for attending the Top Talk. We have been fortunate to have one of the renowned entrepreneur identity. All the participants of this meeting are all inspired by your sparkling words. Once again, I would like to state that we are glad to have all participants here. We thank you for being with us. It has remained a pronounced pleasure. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Bye-bye.